Friends, good morning. It's nice to be celebrating Mass in the daylight this morning. All right, so this morning, friends, we're celebrating the feast of St. Martin de Porres. In our gospel, the church gives us, we hear the Lord instructing us. He says, rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. There is so much packed into this. One of the questions I was turning over in my mind praying with this gospel is, why does the Lord insist upon this? Why does the Lord insist? Why is care for the poor so at the heart of the gospel? Why does the Lord insist upon this? Why does Jesus make this uncomfortable demand that we care for the poor? Anybody who's ever worked in that capacity, you know that there's something uncomfortable about it. Why does he make this demand? Because he knows that we wouldn't otherwise. He knows that we wouldn't otherwise. He knows that given our bent nature, because of the fall, because of original sin, we would always prefer to be around people who are easier to be around. He knows that it's easier. We would always prefer to love people who love us. He knows that we would always prefer to spend time with people who can reciprocate and bless us in return. In other words, he knows that our hearts are bent towards self-regard and comfort and self-concern, and his desire, his passionate love for us insists on bending us in the opposite direction. He desires that we become saints, that we become the kinds of creatures that are able of living in eternity. He wants us to become like him, which means that our hearts have to be turned inside out. Instead of being turned inwards in self-concern, self-regard, we have to be turned inside out. We have to be broken out of this comfort in order to be conformed to him, bent in the direction of selflessness. That's why he commands this. Because later on in the gospel, in Matthew's gospel, he'll tell us that he's personally present, hiding in the poor, the hungry, the crippled, the blind, the lame, the imprisoned, the sick. He hides himself precisely in those places where we least expect to find divinity and where we're most shocked that that's where he prefers to go. He's hiding in neediness, in littleness, in weakness, in annoyance, and all. That's where he goes in order to break us out of the black holes of our own egos, to go and search for him, to serve him there, to love, to be broken out of selfishness into love. I'm talking about all this because the saint that we celebrate today, St. Martin de Porres, he's someone who this was his life. His life was in so many ways a response to Jesus in this gospel. That it was this great celebration, a banquet. His whole life was him throwing a banquet for the guests of honor who were the poor, the blind, the crippled, the lame. And he served them constantly. This is St. Martin de Porres. Some beautiful biography stuff about him. He was born in 1579 in Lima, Peru, December 9th. And he was the illegitimate son of a Spanish nobleman and this freed African slave, which meant that his mixed heritage was a cause of great discrimination and suffering in his life. He was highly discriminated against. And as a young boy, he apprenticed with a barber and a surgeon, developing these skills in healing that he would later use later on in life. But by the way, as an interesting aside, I read that aspect in a biography, barber and surgeon. I was like, that just don't seem like they go together, right? Turns out in history they did. Barbers and surgeons, it was like the same profession, which I'm glad they're different professions now. But apparently the barbers, because they had access to all the sharp tools, they got to do some minor surgeries. Just like this Sweeney Todd House of Horrors. Anyway, the whole barber pole, right? The white with the red stripe, that's the bandage with blood. That's that symbolism. That's just a freebie. I wasn't even planning on telling you that. Anyway, so, all right, age 15, he joins the Dominican order as this lay brother, and he's just doing all these menial tasks in the friary. He's taking care of the sick and the poor in the priory's infirmary. He's taking care of, again, the blind, the lame, the sick, the crippled, the unimpressive guests who have nothing to offer. It's the people who show up to the potluck empty-handed. That's who he's taking care of. And he was known for this extraordinary charity. He founded orphanages later on in life. He cared for other slaves. There was all these miracles attributed to him. Bilocation was attributed to him, which is pretty nuts. That's a pretty wild charism. But also healing and multiplying food. I think that's a pretty cool one. Anyway, but his whole life was this great banquet of charity. Again, in which the guests of honor were the blind, the lame, the crippled, the people who had nothing they could give him in return. He was canonized by Pope John the 23rd, and he became the first black saint of the Americas. Okay, so what's the point? I want to invite us today, calling on his intercession, to ask for the grace of having our hearts, again, just to be broken out of the black hole of egoism, selfishness, self-regard, that we would really see the people around us where Jesus is hiding, and that we would be moved to love them. Our salvation depends on that.